Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I'm Summer for those that are new. Today's video, I'm going to be doing a stacked bob tutorial. I love cutting bobs. It's probably my favorite haircut to do in salon. I always find them so enjoyable. And today I'm specifically just going to be doing your classic with a stack in the back and an angle going towards the front. There's different variations, but this one is your classic tried and true one that everyone should know how to thoroughly do before moving into any of the different variations of a bob. So we're just gonna go ahead and get started. Okay, so sectioning is one of the most important things with doing really any haircut, but specifically with a bob, you want very nice, clean, straight lines. You're obviously gonna start off by sectioning off your front pieces from the ear forward. So you like to you wanna be behind the ear, not in front of it. And just push everything going forward. And if you have to readjust your section, you obviously can. I feel like that's pretty good though. So I'm just gonna take that and clip it up nice and tight and out of the way. And we're gonna do the same on the other side. Okay, so now that I have my front sections clipped off, really, placement of where you're gonna bring your angle up, you wanna kind of establish before you section the back. Usually on a client, I'll feel through to see where their occipital bone is. Obviously with a mannequin, it's a little bit different. It's not as prominent, but you don't really wanna stack higher than where the occipital bone is at the base. So basically where the curve of their head is. So kind of feel through with your fingers, which really in general, it kind of meets like just under the tip of their head. So you can always use that as a guide as well. And then, so I'll just go basically in that area, and I like to take that section and clip all of that up as kind of my guide as to where to stop my stack. Okay, so now that you've established that, I just like to still take kind of multiple sections with the back. It just makes the stacking part easier, and I like to use duckbill clips for this part. I feel like it just secures the hair in a little bit better, and they're not quite as bulky as your bigger ones, but the bigger ones are great for a whole section. So I like to just kind of split it in the middle. Keeps it nice and clean that way. And then I just will do kind of like my first top one to get that up out of the way. And always have your client looking down. It's easiest and it helps the angle flow better too. Usually once I get to their occipital bone, I'll tell them that they can go ahead and look normal. But while you're creating that stack, you want their head to be looking down. Okay, so now we have her all sectioned off, and now we're gonna actually get into cutting, which is very exciting. So like I said, you're gonna have your client looking down. I'm gonna adjust her head a little bit more. You don't want them like all the way fully down, but enough that there is that angle. And I just like to start off right in the middle to kind of create my guide, and then I go from there. And then obviously you want to keep the hair nice and wet, so respray if you need to. This mannequin hair is drying a little bit faster than I anticipated. Okay, so now that I have created my first guideline here, part of creating that stack is you want to make sure you're bringing your next section out as close to a 90-degree angle as possible. You don't want to over direct it. You don't want it too low. You want to bring it out, like I said, close to that 90-degree angle. So that way, that is what creates the stack and the angle in and of itself. You want to make sure your sections are thin enough that you can see through to what's underneath. If it's too thick, you're going to lose your guide. But one thing you can always do is lift the hair to see what's poking out. If you feel like you're second guessing where your guide is, you can always do that to find it. So I'm gonna pull it out, flip up just to make sure, and then cut. And then one thing too, you wanna also move your body with where you're cutting. So when you're in the center, you want to be in the center. When you're moving to the left, you want to adjust to the left, and same with the right. That way you're pulling your hair out at the appropriate angle. You're not over directing it to one side or coming out with it too much. So that way you keep, like I said, those nice clean lines, even section, and that's what's also going to help create the shape. And then obviously, if you see you're not cutting even, you just, as you go, you can easily fix that. So you can see right there where I left that out too much, and you just go in and cut it off. You don't want to overthink it. You know, you feel like if you're not doing everything perfect, that's the beauty of it. As you go, you just easily can match up your points to make sure everything is meeting. Again, you want to move your body with each area. Try not to go past the second knuckle. I mean, they teach you that in hair school. 9 out of 10 times you don't listen, but it is very beneficial if you do. Again, stick with pulling it out as close to 90 degrees as possible. I feel like that's a lot of times a lot of people's problems with bobs. They don't pull it out high enough to create that stack, and you end up kind of with just like a layered haircut almost. I mean, a lot of people don't want a tight stack, but if you're trying to do an actual real bob, you need to make sure you're pulling that out to create the angle in the stack. Otherwise, you're just having a layered haircut. Okay, as I go, I like to take my corners and I'll pull them to the center to make sure that they're meeting up, that one side's not longer than the other. That way I'm keeping an even flow as I go up. And it just helps make it easier along the way, rather than once you get fully done and you're like, I'm totally lopsided on one side and you gotta go back in and reshape everything. As you move up it, you wanna continually check. Do it about every other section. One thing with clients and apparently mannequins, usually on the very bottom hairline, especially in the corners, there'll be pieces that like to just poke out. So I'll touch on that more when we get to the dry cutting, but usually I find with the very bottom of the perimeter, you always have to keep going back in sometimes and just nipping away. The hairs have a mind of its own. It's frustrating, but so just don't be down on yourself if you see that that's something happening with you. It's not you necessarily, it's always sometimes just the client's hair. Okay, so now that I'm to her section, kind of along her occipital bone that I clipped up, I'm gonna do one last final section to create a little bit of my stack. And then we'll touch on how to go about the rest of the cut after that. So I can tell by looking at her and feeling she, for whatever reason, is staying longer on this side. So as I check, I can see right down, yep, right down here. There we go. So see all that? Gotta go. Okay, so now that we've created most of our stack, because like I said, you don't want to go too far over her occipital bone, what you will do then is you're just going to bring down as you section your next pieces. Instead of directing them at a 90-degree angle, you're just going to bring them down and meet them. And again, if you need to wet your client's hair again, always just get out your spray bottle. You want to kind of keep each section even as far as the saturation goes on the hair. So instead of bringing this out, I'm just going to bring it down and meet at that line. It's okay to still have some sort of a light angle. You just don't want it, like you don't want it completely flat, but bring it out a little bit, just not where you're fully pulling it out. So I don't know what that angle would be called. It's definitely not a 90, 45 degree or somewhere in the middle. Okay, so now that I've created my stack, I don't like to do any further like pinpoint cutting on the bottom until after I get it dry. A big part of cutting bobs is you spend, sometimes half of your haircut is dry cutting. Dry cutting is where you're gonna really perfect your line, perfect the flow of it. So if you have a client that wants a bob and they don't wanna blow dry, tell them they don't have an option. You always will need to do dry cutting with a bob to finalize the shape. So the way I like to cut my layers with it, I don't really like a lot of layers in a bob. I like it to just be sort of soft flow. You gotta create some layers so you're taking out the weight from here. But I don't like to do a lot of layering. So how I do my layers, so to do my layers the way that I do it, I just take, starting from the middle, make her head straight, and I bring everything up, and where my last piece falls out, I just cut up from there. I'm gonna continue to do that all the way through. So this just creates a softness from the weight to where like your angle meets the top. And then, like I said, when I do my dry cutting is when I really kind of more so get in here and create more softness to it. Now, if somebody has a ton of hair, you surely, yeah, you can go in and do more layering. This is just what I prefer to do. I think it creates a nice soft shape without too much like movement, but you have enough. You can already see a little bit of the line start to form with her angle. Okay, now that I've done that, I will just take my final top section. Again, try to keep those sections, the line nice and straight. Bring it all up. and then even out that top. And then we'll leave it for now until we dry and do our dry cutting. Okay, so now we're gonna move on to the sides, which you can see her angle forming here. So this is gonna be your guide, this longest piece in the front, to create the angle for your sides. So to take your first section, you don't wanna just bring this all down and cut it down, because what happens is if you don't cut a perfectly straight line, you're just gonna keep cutting and cutting and cutting, and you're gonna lose the angle. So always take multiple sections for the sides, even if you think you don't need to, even if your client has really fine, thin hair, take multiple sections. And I always like to take the section kind of angled down because that is going to be the direction you're cutting, so it just makes more sense. I'm actually gonna make that even smaller. This part is personal preference. I prefer my clients to just look normal. Some stylists will have their clients looking down. I don't like to have them look down because you lose the way the hair just naturally falls when you're looking straight up. Nobody walks around with their head down. It's just not realistic. So I always cut with them looking just normal. So like I said, your guide is going to be your longest piece right here. So you're gonna take from that and just go straight down. Take it, you're gonna angle your finger down and cut up. And then take your next section, flip it over. Again, don't forget to respray your section. If the hair is too dry, you want the same saturation everywhere evenly. So we're gonna bring it down, angle it, and cut. So we have our angle going forward, and then I layer my front and sides the same way that I do the back by bringing everything up, and I over direct it back just ever so slightly. I personally don't like to take a lot of weight from the front. I don't like a lot of layers in the front. I feel like it takes away from the standard classic look of a bob. Again, if somebody has a ton of hair, you can do more layers, but overall, I like to keep it very simple by just removing a little bit of weight without doing too many layers. So again, I'm gonna go up, but also direct it back. And honestly, sometimes I'll even wait to do that last piece until after it's dried and I can see how it's laying, because the thing is, especially with people with finer hair, this is true with my hair, I can't do really any layers in the front. I have no weight. So if somebody accidentally takes it off, it's gone. And I either have to put extensions in or grow it out. So a lot of times with finer hair, I don't like to really do it. I'll go through the motion of it to see what that's gonna take out. So like for her right now, it would be taking out this little bit. That probably is fine, but I'm gonna wait to do it until I have it dry. And then I'll just sometimes go back through and do it at a little bit less of an angle and cut in. All right, and then we're gonna repeat the same on the other side. So for doing the second side, you wanna do the same type of sectioning. Never just have this down and shoot it straight down. You wanna do multiple sections, so you're getting a nice, clean haircut and you're not taking off too much. So this is the thing, with some hair types, if you cut this too short or angle it at not enough angle, you can correct it with the rest of the hair a lot of the times. So that's why sectioning is key. So again, we're gonna bring it down. This is your guide right here. And you're gonna bring it to that. Angle your hand down and cut. And then again, I'm just gonna repeat doing my layers the same way on this side as I did the others and the back by going up and over directing it back away from her face. Okay, before I move on to my front, this can be done either way. You can either check your front first or you can check your layers on the top of the head. I'm just gonna go ahead and check the layers on the top of the head. What I do is I just go and bring everything up. I leave out kind of this front little section, which would be kind of like where her weight needs to stay around her face. And I just bring the rest up. Keep going with a nice line. Bring it up and just slightly back to see where it meets, and then just cut that. You're gonna take to check that and lightly just cut into that very top. Okay, so now that I have finished fully cutting basically the whole haircut, what I'm gonna do is check her front pieces here to make sure that they line up before I go into drying it. So what I like to do to check my front piece, you'll just stand directly in front of your client and you're just gonna match up each side and go through. So you'll wanna do that, which I'm gonna do that now. Okay, so you wanna make sure that their head is straight first of all, and then I just kind of will lightly squat down low so I can see or pump them up, whichever one. And then I'm just gonna go through and see how it lines up for the most part. I'll do key points, so I'll try to grab around their ear because that's a good guide for both sides. And I pull it forward to see what is missing. So I need to angle this a little bit more. And another way you can check it too is by standing behind your client and pulling it back. And you can always also use your mirror. Okay, so now that I've kind of overall checked when it's wet, sometimes you don't want to overthink checking when it's wet just because the hair does lay different dry. So like I said, you spend a lot of time sometimes with a bob dry cutting. So I'm gonna go ahead and get her styled now, and then we'll go in and really perfect it where it needs to. Okay, so for her styling products, I'm going to use Moroccan Oil's Concentrate Smoothing Oil. Love this stuff. 1 to 2 pumps, probably only one on her hair. And then I love Pravana's Polish and Reunite. This is a split end mender. Mannequin head is crap all the time anyways, but on human hair, this stuff is truly amazing for any clients that have severe damage on their ends. It really seals in the ends, takes away any of that frayed look. You can do it wet, and then you can do a little bit on the ends when it's dry too. Love, love, love this stuff. Anti-humidity as well. One thing I want to mention before I do like the full blow dry, when I blow dry, I don't like to separate my sides from the back like this. I feel like it creates a little bit of a crease, and then sometimes when you're doing your dry cutting, it kind of leaves the hair being separated here, which just makes it a little bit more difficult. So I like to just do multiple sections going fully around the head rather than separating it here. Okay, so now she is fully dry, and I did flat iron her a little bit. I forgot how non-cooperative mannequin hair can be. So this is her from her front angle. And then I wanna show you guys the sides before I cut into it to show you guys the importance of dry cutting with bobs. Any haircut really, but especially with bobs. So as you can see, we've got our angle in here working. It obviously needs a little bit of tweaking, but the biggest problem that happens with a lot of bobs, and this was happening a little bit while I was cutting. I'll show you the back. You guys gotta stay with me when you see the back. So the problem is sometimes you get these little baby hairs underneath that wanna pop out. This happens on clients. I almost wanted to like go in and critique this before I showed you guys just because it looks so ugly. But the truth is, this is what happens a lot of times with a lot of bobs. The bottom always pokes out and it's so annoying. You always have to go back in and clean it up, but I wanted you guys to see. So see, it already throws off the whole look of the haircut, and especially on this side too. But what's great is that shows you all you have to do is just go in and clean that up. And then I'm gonna touch on also how we're gonna clean up her layers and the thickness in here. You can go ahead and do some of these steps that I'm gonna show you while dry cutting while it's still wet as well. But I like to do a lot of it dry cutting just because you really get to see how the hair lays, and I feel like you have more control over it rather than it's wet. If you take it too far when it's wet, there's no correcting it. So I like to do it dry. That's just my personal preference. Everything that I'm gonna do dry cutting, you still can do somewhat when it's wet, so you can apply the same steps for when it's wet. I just prefer the dry cutting, and I feel like it gives you the best end result. Okay, so first things first, we're gonna get rid of this hideous little line poking out here. So what I like to do is basically just follow along with where the side angle is and just curve it around with my scissor and comb. Okay, so as I can see right here, this is poking out. So I've got my guide here and my comb to kind of see, and I'm just gonna cut with my scissors at a little bit of an angle. I'm just gonna follow that all the way around. So sometimes one of the most frustrating things is doing the back. It's precise. I like to book all of my bobs an hour-and-a-half appointment. Some hair types I like to take even 2 hours on them, which might sound crazy to some of you, but if you're really trying to do a very thorough precision cut, it takes the time. You have to see how the hair lays, how it lays after you flat ironed it, or if you're just blow drying it. Sometimes it kinks back up, and then you always have these guys that poke back out. And this mannequin is being very stubborn, but just be patient with it. Don't freak out and think you've done something wrong. This is a lot of times just how the hair goes when you're doing a bob. Now I'm correcting this line, but this needs to be cut in a little bit more to create just a little bit more of an angle where some of these spots are poking out. Sometimes we still have to do multiple sections. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do that I've cut along her line a little bit more, I'm just gonna take my scissor over comb and point cut into it to just lightly soften it. And then sometimes you gotta flat iron as you go if you get a kink. And we're just gonna keep continuing up, going scissor over comb. So see where you can see this hair underneath has fallen out and that's still out. Just by cutting into that is what softens and gives more of the angle. If that makes sense, if I'm explaining that right, hopefully I am. Okay, so now that I've cut more of her perimeter in the back, I'm now gonna move into softening this thick line right here. So to do that, I'm first gonna start with my texturizing shears, and I'm just gonna go in and out. Take my scissors again. And you can also apply scissor over comb. Just gonna take this, and you can see a little bit here where this is sticking out, and you're just gonna go in and point cut in. Okay, so hopefully you can see this on the camera, I'm not sure. This hard line right here, this is what I'm trying to blend in. So I'm gonna just keep going scissor over comb and cut into that line. All this, cut into that. See this line? This is your guide. This comes out. And you're just gonna continue to go up around the head into the sides by just kind of doing the same thing I did before with the layers. You're just correcting and softening. When you're wanting to create softness in at the sides, especially kind of right here in the ear, it gets a little bulky. You don't want to ever create a hole. So one way to avoid that when you're wanting to add some texture there, bring it up, let this whole bottom half fall out, and then you can just go in and do some deep point cutting. And you don't have to worry about creating that hole because you've got your base down here. And you can kind of do that same thing all along the sides. Just let your base, the perimeter, fall out so you keep that weight. Okay, so now that I have softened up this one side pretty much how I am liking the way that it's laying, I'm just gonna go through and look at my sides to make sure this is lining up well. So anything that's out of place, I'm just going to correct and get rid of, so that way we have a nice clean line. I'm gonna bring this up first. Yeah, cut that top. And then her front piece along her face, I'm gonna bring all the way back. See how that's laying. And this is where with real clients that sometimes you do need them to move their head. I'll have them angle it this way, look down a little bit for those hairs underneath that sometimes still can be a little bit stubborn and poke out. So don't be afraid to ask your client to move. If they want a nice clean hard line, sometimes they're gonna have to move their head. It just is what it is. And I'm just gonna do the same steps on this other side, match up, even out my line, and then I'm gonna check everything. Often with bobs, you sometimes have to texturize one side of the hair more than the other. Hair grows in a pattern, and sometimes something will look off with the length, but a lot of times it can just be the thickness that's throwing that off. So you might have a spot that you're like, why is this looking longer on the one side? And you go to check it and it's not longer. It's probably because you need to take a little bit more weight out of that section. So one way you can check your front pieces to make sure they're even is what I like to do is I like to take kind of the top perimeter out as if you had like your hair just up on the top of your head. And I'll clip it back. And this is a good way to see how these pieces line up that you can check. And that's also a good way to tell if something is thicker on one side than the other. So this is how I'll get right up in the client's face, squat down however you need to see if it's matching up on both sides. And like I said, if you need to texturize one side over the other. Sometimes your client's hair, depending on how it's laying, can pop up on one side and it'll throw you off. So that's where when you take this up and you're pulling down on those pieces to have them meet is a good way to tell if they're even or not. Okay guys, so there you have it. This is my end result of my bob, of the way that I like to cut to achieve my stacked bobs. As you can see, we've got nice clean lines along her hair. I don't like to do a ton of layering, but there's enough movement there in the hair that you can see, and it gives it a nice lived-in look. It also will show some shape when you curl it. But these are the steps that I always take. Like I said, you can adjust if needed. If you want to add more layers, go ahead and add more layers. It all depends on your client's hair and what they're also wanting for their end result. Bobs take time and precision. So if you are new into hairstyling, or if you're just starting out in school, a bob is one of the more difficult haircuts, I would say. So go out, get a mannequin, and practice makes perfect. So you need to be very precise. Like I said, key things are clean lines, plenty of sections, and you always want to do smaller sections than too big of ones. That way you don't lose your guidelines. So if you guys have any questions at all, please leave a comment below. I would be happy to answer them. I hope you enjoyed my technique, and like I said, you can always tweak and adjust if you need to. This is just how I like to do my bobs. Practice makes perfect, and I still feel like there's always something I can still work on and critique with my bobs. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like I said before, go ahead, give this a thumbs up. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you guys soon.